Well, good evening. Welcome to the Pullman City Council meeting virtually. We're doing it again. And with that, for this June 16th, Dee, would you please call roll?
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor Johnson.
Present.
Councilmember Chapman.
Present.
Councilmember McCall.
Here. You're muted.
Councilmember Parks.
Here.
Councilmember Records.
Here.
Councilmember Weller.
Present.
Councilmember Sorensen.
Here.
Councilmember Wright.
Here.
All right. Under announcements tonight, something you can count on, the Pullman Farmers Market is open every Wednesday from 3:30 to 6:30 at the Brailsford WSU Visitor Center. Also, we've told you a couple of times that Pullman's 4th of July will be taking place, but we will not have the public gathering like we've had in the past, so there won't be any food or any kind of entertainment there except for the fireworks. We are taking funds. Donations are being distributed to the Pullman Chamber of Commerce. That's the group that sponsors the 4th of July. We're hoping by next year we can be back at Sunnyside again. But New Country 104.3 will actually be doing the music, synchronized fireworks, and they're actually going to be putting on a show about 2 hours prior to the fireworks, trying to bring back those memories. I think they have some music from the Kingpins and some others that will happen. And so, again, fireworks will go off at 10 o'clock at night, and we're accepting donations. You may know the Whitman County application for state authorization to Phase 3 has been approved. So business activities right now are authorized if they can prove that they can meet all the established safety criteria. And I know that Jen Hackman, our economics development person, along with the chamber, are working with various businesses right now. Many of them are coming back. Together, we will be strong again. And also, please, if you haven't, please go online and fill in the census questionnaire. It only takes about 5 minutes. Census information is so important for our community, for the university, for the city. It determines how many representatives will be in the House, all kinds of things like that. So please take your time. It only takes about 5 minutes to fill in the census. With that, we'll go to the consent agenda. These items are considered routine in nature. The council has had a chance to look at them ahead of time. Do I hear a motion to read by title only?
So moved. Second.
Moved and seconded. With that, Laura McAloon, our city attorney, consent agenda.
Thank you, Mayor. Your consent agenda consists of a motion to dispense with the reading of the minutes of the regular meeting of June 9, 2020 and approve them as submitted. A motion to approve disbursements for accounts payable checks numbered 100166 to 100210, totaling $574,036.20. A motion to ratify change order number 1 to the Rainy Pool Repair and Liner Replacement Contract. A motion to approve a lodging tax grant to Palouse Summer Series in the amount of up to $20,000 for the Palouse Summer Series baseball tournament. And a motion to approve a lodging tax grant to Pacific Northwest Junior Boys and Girls Amateur Championship in the amount of up to $15,000.
Is there any item the council would like out for discussion? Al?
Number 4.
Number 4. Any others?
Yeah.
Dan?
Number
3. You said number 3? Okay.
Yeah.
Consent agenda then consists of items 1, 2, 5. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay. Dan, records number 3.
I just wanted to know if we could, if somebody could speak to kind of what was the damage that we found and in a little more detail and why that wasn't anticipated.
Mayor, I can speak to that.
Thank you, Clayton.
You bet. Dan, when we were scoping the plans for the project, of course, we have a pool with a liner over the concrete. That liner, I think, was put in. I had it in the staff report, probably, when was it? 1997, I have it here. So since 1997, that pool's had the liner on it. And what we did during the scoping of the project is we went down, the architect went down and kind of tapped along the perimeter of the pool. And we suspected there could be some concrete that would need to be repaired. But with the liner there, we couldn't get a good visual. So it was really a guess. Once the liner was pulled up, what happens commonly with a liner is water can get trapped behind there. And so freeze and thaw can break concrete. And so once we pulled that liner off, there was more concrete damage than we had anticipated.
Okay, thank you.
You bet.
So with that, Dan, would you make a motion to approve this one?
Move to approve item number 3.
Second.
Motion is second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? With that, item number 4, Al Sorensen.
Okay, I just wanted to talk about this just a little bit. This Palouse Summer Series baseball. Hold on. My apologies. I'm having a little bit of connection problems here. This Palouse Summer Series stuff has really been a great asset to our businesses and local economy for a number of years. And if you looked at and read some of the application, there they asked, well, what are you doing to advertise? And Scott Parrish says, I don't have to advertise anymore. That's a pretty good deal. And you don't have to advertise. People are trying to come. But what I wanted to say was the lodging tax money and grant application has a number of requirements for us to reimburse them for the grant. And one of those is that the activities need to occur in Pullman. And there is a little bit of difficulty going on right now because of the COVID situation and groups and certain places not being able to be used. Washington State University is not going to allow him to use the Cougar baseball field, the Bailey Brayton Field, as one of his areas for the tournament. And the Marty Quan Field right at the moment is still up in limbo a little bit in regards to that. There's still some discussion going on if whether the school district or the city is going to allow him to use that field. Apparently they're having a meeting tomorrow to kind of decide how that's going to go. So right at the moment, the only field that he has available is over in Colfax with their facilities over there. So I know that, and Pat, I'm going to drag you into this here in a second. One of the things is that the activities have to happen in Pullman, I think, as one of the requirements of the grant. And I just wanted to mention in here that I talked with Scott Parrish today a little bit. The first couple of weeks, so there's 7 weekends of tournaments at this point. And the first couple of weekends right at the moment, he does not have Marty Quan Field in Pullman as one of the fields because he hasn't been able to really get an answer as to whether he can use it or not. After that, he's thinking that he will be able to use it and that we will be able to offer that to him. And so my point of all of this is that, these baseball parents, players, coaches, most of them stay in Pullman, and this is where they're spending their money for lodging. This is where they're spending their money for meals, but they may have to drive to Colfax to go get or play the game. And I guess I'm just a little bit concerned that, if that's the case, and then Pat, maybe we deny some reimbursement of grant money because of this, I would want to hope that we would try to work with them as much as possible because they definitely are doing the tourism thing in Pullman. So I wanted to throw that out there. And hopefully after tomorrow's meeting with the school district and things, we'll have some better answers. But I just wanted to make sure that we understand what's going on. So Pat, maybe you can expand on that a little bit.
Well, and we have that same concern, Al, and a lot of what we talked about, is contingent upon what fields he's able to use. My understanding, though, too, and Dee, correct me if we didn't talk about this last week, city play fields are available too, I think.
Yeah, that's not possible because this has to have a regulation field for baseball. This is not the little guys playing. This is full size field. So
Okay, because we talked about that last week, and so that was just something that was kind of, floating around out there. I understand that they can, at least as of last week, they could play in Moscow as well.
Yeah, there is a field over there, but I don't know where that's at with that. Kurt, do you want to jump in here a little bit maybe and
Sure.
touch on it?
Yeah, so, Quan Field is just a little bit unique, and it's probably more of a shared facility between the city and the school district. And I think we want to be kind of good partners in approving, play there. As Pat, as you mentioned, say we were able to use the city play fields if it was full size, they would be allowed to, as long as groups are adhering to, social distancing and have their return to play plans in place. If they keep it under 50 people, they would be allowed to play. And Scott has already submitted this, has a plan. It's obviously going to change, as all our plans are going to change as we go through this. So he's got it, worked out to where basically inside the field between players, coaches, managers, probably each team, a few fans, that he could limit it to 50 people. I think the school district has some concerns if those fans that go outside the fences, and especially up at Quan, they sit up in the parking lot up there, which is obviously some of that's on school district property. So they've got some concerns there. But as Al mentioned, the district as themselves, I believe, are meeting tomorrow to discuss how they handle all these outside user group requests. I really think it's not going to be a problem for them to play up there. And I guess if the school district, really their meeting tomorrow has concerns, I'd be comfortable in kind of taking that forward and having the discussion with them and working with Scott and making this happen. So games are being played in Pullman, which are important to us as we restart.
Right. Well, and as you can see, we awarded them 100 out of 100. So that reflects the level of priority that, we want to give to this particular series of events. We're certainly bound in some regards by the RCW, and I would defer to Laura in terms of how much, margin we have to deviate from some of those kinds of things. Given the circumstances that we're in, I would think that we've got some room in there, but certainly our main thought was that they're going to be staying here in Pullman. They're going to be eating in our restaurants. They're going to be hopefully, doing some retail activities. And those are all things that are really important regardless of where the games are going to be played. So we did take that into consideration, but again, RCW dictates certain things. So Laura, do you have any thoughts on that at all?
If I heard Councilmember Sorensen correctly, your concern was that the reimbursement limits expenses incurred within the city of Pullman. Is that what you're asking?
Well, I think that there was a comment made that if they didn't play games in Pullman, he possibly would not be reimbursed for part of the grant. So I want to make sure that if he's able to go forward with this, that would not be an issue.
that is not one of the statutory requirements. That might be, maybe that's coming from the reporting requirements, where the impact of your event and the attendance and where the attendance occurred and the number of people that attended and actually came to Pullman, those are all facts that the Lodging Tax Advisory Committee gathers through the reimbursement process, but it doesn't limit the amount of funds. The amount of funds are authorized through the grant. So if the council awards a grant and it's an eligible expense, as in it's operations for an event that promotes tourism or brings tourists to the Pullman area, it doesn't have to take place in city limits. So those should still be eligible expenses. I guess I'm not sure where that limitation language is coming from.
Okay, that you just answered the question, Laura,
Okay.
saying that the event doesn't have to happen in Pullman as long as the impact of it is in Pullman. So I think we're going to be good. Pat, would you kind of agree with
Yeah,
that?
I would. Absolutely.
Yeah, this has been a very, I mean, almost 20 years, I believe, that he's been doing this, and it's been a huge impact for the city of Pullman. So I just didn't want to have there be a problem later when he turned in his receipts to get reimbursed. So, Laura, I think you nailed it. So thank you very much.
Okay.
And I saw you had a hand up earlier. Did you have a question on this thing?
Nope, it got resolved. So that's, no.
Al, do you want to make a motion on this then for number 4?
Yeah, I would move to adopt consent agenda item number 4.
Second.
Moving second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, with that, we go down to the regular agenda. First item is a resolution authorizing the execution of a professional services agreement between the city and Design West Architects. Clayton Forsman, our Deputy Public Works Director. Clayton?
Thank you, and good evening, Mayor and City Council. The 2018 Parks and Paths Bond included repairs and improvements to the Rainy Park restrooms and shower facilities. Staff reached out to Design West Architects to request a proposal to complete the pool house renovations. Design West was chosen based on their familiarity with the Rainy Pool complex and the past work they've completed at the site. The final scope and budget was negotiated with Design West and is included in the professional services agreement before you tonight. The project includes the following improvements to the Rainy Pool House: an accessible restroom stall in the women's locker room, men's and women's shower modifications, improvements to the public restrooms that are accessed from the park side, hot water system upgrades, site and fencing improvements, and coordination for a climbing wall. Staff is recommending council authorize execution of the professional services agreement with Design West for the Rainy Park Pool House renovations project. I'd be glad to take any questions.
Questions of Clayton? Seeing none, do I hear a motion on this?
Move to adopt.
Second.
Moving seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? With that, we now move to item number 2. It's a motion to authorize acceptance of a rural business development grant. Jennifer Heckman has been doing a lot of work on this one. So, Jennifer, it's all yours.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Mayor and Council. The USDA Rural Business Development Grant is a competitive grant designed to support targeted technical assistance, training, and other activities leading to the development or expansion of small and emerging private businesses in rural areas that have fewer than 50 employees and less than $1 million in gross revenues. RBDG funds must be directed for projects benefiting rural areas or towns outside the urbanized periphery of any city with a population of 50,000 or more. There's no maximum grant amount for enterprise or opportunity type grants. However, smaller requests are given higher priority. Generally, grants range from $10,000 up to $500,000, and there's no cost sharing requirement. The total opportunity type grant funding is limited statutorily to up to 10% of the total RBDG annual funding, and RBDG applications compete at the state office level. which are dependent on appropriations. The City of Pullman sought approval to apply for a grant on March 31st, 2020. Under emergency rules, Mayor Glenn A. Johnson reviewed and approved the grant application request. The application is to provide lighting for safety as well as accent lighting on bridges on a segment of the downtown Riverwalk running from East Spring Street across from the WSU Brailsford Visitor Center to the historic trestle on Pullman. The project, which was really sent to us from the Downtown Pullman Association through one of their design committee, calls for installation of 3 acorn lights to be planted in areas that are currently not very well lit, and also calls for matching string lighting to be placed along 3 bridges: the flat bridge behind the Armory Building, the Pine Street Plaza Bridge, and the historic trestle. The grant request is for a total of $37,139. The total project costs, including in-kind leveraging in the amount of $5,038, is $42,177. 4 downtown businesses provided letters of support: Sanctuary Yoga, Paradise Creek Brewery, Nashi's, and B&L Bicycles. As well, although it wasn't included in the grant itself, the Pullman Civic Trust also offered a letter of support for the project. On June 4th, 2020, city staff received notification that it had been selected to receive the RBDG funding for the fiscal year 2020 in the amount of $37,139. And we have a letter of conditions and other documents requiring signatures so that the grant can be obligated. Kevin Gardes and I reviewed the conditions and documents and are satisfied that the project can be completed and all conditions met to receive the grant. The grant must be obligated within 30 days of notification. So staff is requesting City Council acceptance of this grant. And upon acceptance, we will complete 2 documents and have Glenn sign them. They actually, in your packet, probably have my name on them, but those were early documents and we've received the final documents. So those will all be signed by the mayor. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Questions of Jennifer on this? Oh, Al? Okay.
Yeah, I think this is great that we're awarded this grant. I have a couple of questions though. You know, we have a downtown plan designed by BDS, and one of my questions is in regards to the actual lighting and the design of the poles and what they're going to be. It says that they're going to be the acorn lights. Is that something that matches what's currently on the path?
Yes.
Okay. And then, you know, there may be some change of all of that once we go into our full phase of redesigning downtown. But it doesn't appear to me that there's too much difference in things here. So those are the lights that match, right?
Yes.
Okay. And then the lighting on the bridges, what is that? LED stuff? Is it bulbs? I'm just curious about the actual physical look of it.
Right. Although those specific lights have not yet been selected, and we would work with an electrician to do that, we would seek the most attractive and long-lasting LED lights that we can find. That is the desire. The Downtown Pullman Association Design Committee suggested lighting similar to what's on the lumberyard. They really like those lights. And so that was kind of the design that we had in mind.
That was also my question in regards to who was making the decisions on what we were going to be putting up down there. And I think there needs to be, you know, a good review of what that may be.
Happy to do that. Thank you.
Jennifer, I would also say energy efficiency.
Thank you, Councilman Mueller. Yes.
And one thing that we've seen in other cities too with LEDs, you have so much more variety that you can have different colors too. So it would be nice to have some multicolors for that area too, that you could have, that could be seasonal and things like that. So.
Thanks, Mayor. That actually is one of the suggestions that I should have mentioned. Bryce Erickson, who is the chair of the design committee, would like to consider, if we can find them, LED lights that can change color. We have not made that selection, but we would certainly have an opportunity to review the lights and select the ones that are the most appropriate.
Eileen, I saw your hand was up.
Yeah, the design committee drilled down into this pretty thoroughly, and we found that there were a good many high quality, inexpensive products with a lot of flexibility, a lot of different colors, a lot of different modes. They would chase, they can flash, they can blink. So a lot of really good quality products, very inexpensive.
Excellent. Any other questions or comments? With that, do I hear a motion on this?
Move to approve or adoption or acceptance of this grant.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We now come to new business. I have not heard from the public of any new business. Do we have any new business from the council?
Yeah, Mayor. Oh,
Okay.
go ahead,
Brandon.
Councilman Swartz.
Brandon, go ahead,
Okay.
Brandon. I've already talked.
Brandon first, and then we'll go to Al.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to go over the email that we received from Adam about 4 o'clock regarding the LTAC grant denial, and try to just figure out what the next steps are. What does this look like in terms of the proposed project, and when might we receive information on the components of that, or reason for denial? Because if it is just one portion of that was of concern, maybe we can still go over that and figure that out.
Okay. Jen made the presentation, but Laura's here. That she mentioned the last time, we can wait 45 days for them to respond to us, and then we can make that, the council can make that decision themselves. But Jen, do you want to add anything to it?
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, you know, the decision was unanimous, and there was a lot of comments about, you know, what the details would look like. And Pat, feel free to chime in, because Pat chaired the meeting. You know, but what I heard from the committee was that they felt that this was benefiting downtown, but not the entire city. I'm trying to get memory, Pat, so you might want to correct me here, but concerns about management of the parklets themselves, and just a lot of uncertainty about their impact on tourism.
Well, I think first and foremost, there were just a lot of details that we just couldn't get answers to. Not the least of which is the implied cost involved with the maintenance of these parklets. And since we met last week, the picture of the parklets went from a combination of public and private to only public. Therefore, committing some city maintenance time, with which we are already, given our budgetary constraints of the pandemic, and the fact that we really have no seasonal employees that could continue maintenance of these areas, was certainly a concern. The other area is that of the whole sanitization protocols involved with keeping those areas clean, and they are 24/7, since they were going to be city projects. And so we felt that there were just too many unknowns and too many hanging details on this for us to be able to approve what was presented to us today. Now, we did recommend to Jen that perhaps the city or economic development come back to the lodging tax committee with kind of an amended application, which might be a little bit more easily managed, still with monies available to be spent, but with not quite so much city involvement, and one that might not impact so much of the sidewalks and the roadways. I think there's a couple of things that we can do. Now, this is just my opinion, but back when we first talked about the BDS study, we talked about having a quick fix somewhere. And, you know, we talked about Pine Street being one of those areas that could possibly be a quick fix to kind of get some inviting ambiance downtown, drawing people in. We wouldn't have to build a platform for Pine Street. So that would be one area. The other area, maybe making it a little bit more inviting, would be the High Street area, again, without platforms, without hopefully having to purchase or, you know, move too much furniture. And again, given the financial restrictions that we have with so many people, at least in Parks and Rec, not working right now and temporary employees not being brought on, that it was too much of a burden to bring on for just a short period of time. So that's some of the rationale behind where our decision went today. And as Jennifer indicated, it was unanimous. And those are with hoteliers, with myself, with a citizen, and actually a citizen and a Chamber of Commerce representative. So everyone pretty much shared the same concerns.
So,
Brandon?
yeah, Pat, I appreciate you explaining that. My fear, and if we have to go back to the drawing board and modify this a little bit, I'm okay. My fear is one of scope. We as a council decided that this would be a good idea, meaning, you know, I think we're in the best place to decide on budgetary restrictions and other thing. I don't think that that's within the scope of the LTAC to decide whether this can be maintained by city employees based on current staffing. I would kind of liken that to be like saying, you know, we're not sure, does Scott Parrish have enough people to run his tournament? Does he have enough of these kind of events?
Scott Parrish is not the city of Pullman. We're talking about the city of Pullman here, and the rigid budget restrictions that we know are in place right now. And we're hard pressed to maintain the existing facilities that we have, let alone adding 2 additional ones that would be required for maintenance.
Right, but that I feel like would be council's job to decide on that aspect of it, right? So what we're really grading, I would think, from an LTAC would be whether this would accomplish the goals in bringing people downtown, in helping them to come to businesses and so on and so forth.
Again, these changed from what was presented last week. And these are only to be public parklets where people, yes, could go and bring food in, which is one area of concern for the garbage and the remnants left behind. Who's going to maintain that? The businesses that are contiguous to those locations. That was a huge concern. We can barely keep up with the garbage that's goes into the city receptacles. So, I mean, there are issues there. We're supposed to be representing the businesses that are involved in some of this, as well as all of our citizens. And a lot of the comments that we received from other businesses were thinking, number one, that they were going to be part of the process, being in the streeteries, the restaurants, and that other people just felt that there was going to be too much debris, too much residual fallout from some of this for perhaps not a lot of return.
I saw Eileen had a hand up. Eileen, you had a comment.
I was just curious. I was up at Krugel Park. We had a casual meeting of a workshop from some of the folks from the senior center. And at that time, the caution tape was being removed from the playground equipment at Krugel Park. and there was mowing being done, if we're taking the caution tape off the playground equipment, how would that impact our little parklets? I mean, are the city crews going to be sanitizing the playground equipment in our parks on a regular basis, or was that caution tape going to be replaced at some point? So
I can't answer that question.
I'm saying if we can maintain the playground equipment at Krugel Park, I mean, it is a little different to do the parklets downtown, but is there a protocol to something that I'm missing here?
Adam, you're on the line, I saw, so you might.
I was just going to comment that I think for the disinfectant, we've put up some disclaimer signs also, because it's not something we were going to be able to do on a regular basis. I mean, not on a probably daily basis. So I think that's another way that you can mitigate some of the risk, is if disinfectant is something that's a concern, putting up signage that it's not something that's always maintained is an avenue to try and mitigate some of that concern as well.
I heard from the owner of one of the restaurants this afternoon at Pine and Main, who said that if they had it on Pine Street, or at least just a parklet there, he would help maintain it and would help with lighting that he brought from his previous restaurant. So there might be a little public-private partnership there. Al, I see your hand.
Yeah, I just, question of Adam here, and in regards to the grant request, and clarify something for me here. The grant request to LTAC was for the parklets. What is the status of the parking, bike lane, and all that? Is that affected by the decline of this?
No, council member, it's not. That is work that's going to get underway tomorrow and should be done by Thursday or Friday at the latest of this week.
Thank you.
Okay, Ann.
Thank you, Mayor. I understand the LTAC committee's concerns, and I'm hopeful that we can bring back another revised proposal, because I think that it's really important, even though it doesn't address precisely tourism. In these times, what we're trying to do is get even local residents to just be able to come downtown and enjoy something that's very pleasurable. I've received several emails and comments that residents are excited about this prospect and would be looking forward to enjoying it. So I'm hopeful that if we need to revisit and revamp the proposal, that we could do that in a fairly efficient manner and get it back before the LTAC committee for reconsideration.
Okay. So I'm hearing from Dan, please. Dan.
Yeah, I just want to say, and I'm kind of sitting here pondering this, so maybe if I start talking, it'll start to make sense. But kind of what Brandon was saying about the kind of scope and the role of the LTAC committee, in looking over the selection criteria form that we use for kind of all of the projects that are being assessed here, some of the concerns that Pat, that you said the committee brought up, I'm not sure all of those types of concerns fit within the selection criteria form that we're using. I understand kind of your concerns, where those concerns and the concerns of the committee are coming from. But I mean, I kind of feel like Brandon's comments there have some merit too, and what is the role of the LTAC and what is the role of City Council in assessing those types of concerns. So I think it's important for the LTAC to raise those concerns. But if the role of the LTAC committee is to assess kind of what is going to be the success of the project and what is going to be the ability of the project to draw in people to promote tourism, some of these concerns I feel like are a little outside of that scope. But then there's something that you said, Pat, about the concerns about the ability for the city to be able to maintain kind of the cleanliness, not just the sanitation, but the remnants being left over, or trash pickup and things like that. I see that could have an impact on whether or not the LTAC committee thinks that this project is going to be successful in drawing people in, because if we're not able to maintain it, then it's not going to be attractive for people to go to. I just want to say I'm trying to kind of balance those two things there, of like still understanding what is the scope of the LTAC committee's decision, but also understanding that this is something that the council is interested in, and ultimately it's a council decision, and the LTAC is an advisory committee. But that's just some of my thoughts on that.
Would Judge and Pat and Jen, would it be easier for us to scale it down a little bit, talk about one parklet instead of 3, and do this as an experiment? Because we're in the middle of June. It's going to take a while to construct and get in there. We want to get it going for at least for the summer. Is there a way that
and that was our recommendation back to Jen. Obviously, we weren't expecting that this would come up tonight because it wasn't to have been heard until next week at council anyway. Our recommendation was to submit another application addressing more of the details and looking at what we could do without the large time impact of, we're going to spend $17.5 thousand for an area of time that may only be used for a couple, 3 months. Given the weather that we have today, we may only have the middle of July to the middle of September to be able to use these areas. So, I mean, that certainly has to be a consideration. So yeah, we are well open to looking at additional application. Again, the scope of the committee is to promote tourism. And the promotion of tourism in this application was secondary. It had to do with enhancing a downtown area that might or might not be visited by potential tourists, visitors to the area, and maybe to bring them down where they've already been here. So there wasn't anything that was really impactful to us to see what the level of tourism would be enhanced or improved as a result of this expenditure.
So I'm hearing from the council tonight that would like to have some activity on this and to redo it, perhaps scale it down and get it moving. And I see Al's hand and then Brandon. Al?
Yeah. I'm kind of with you here, Pat, on this, and Laura, you can step in if you want to, but you're right. It's about tourism and that type of thing. I do have a concern about the Lodging Tax Committee's suggestion that we focus more on Pine Street Mall and High Street Mall. And I just want to caution the council that, we have a major project that we maybe want to do with all this. And I would not want to use dollars and time for something that doesn't quite get into the plan in a very fast mode. I don't know if I'm presenting that properly, but I have a very big concern about those mall areas and doing anything rash just because we want to do something. I do believe that the Pine Street parklet type thing across the street from the mall, where I'm talking about, everyone, I think is still a really good idea to try to come up with something to do there, because we're talking about that being part of the major project when time comes around. So I just want to caution council and Lodging Tax Committee, and I don't know that it's not necessarily Lodging Tax Committee idea to say, hey, we don't really approve of this one, but you need to come back and bring us this one. I'm a little gun shy on this.
And across the street, when we were talking about the south lane of Pine Street, that's the one where a local owner said he would also help maintain it. Okay, which would give us a good start. Brandon, then we'll go to.
Let me mention to you, Glenn, when I talked to him, his understanding was that it was not going to be a public thing, that it was going to be partially private. where he could cordon off a certain area of that to be able to serve beverages and that kind of thing. So I don't know that there was a full understanding of where this has kind of gone as far as going from a street parklet streetery, public-private, to just strictly a public endeavor.
Yeah, and he was talking about fencing an area near his restaurant, which would be for where they could have alcohol. And the other thing would be the public area. So
exactly. Yeah. And so that wasn't part of this application that we reviewed today.
Maybe we could do some more investigation with him. So Brandon, then we'll go to Eileen.
No, thank you. And no, you're Pat, you're right about this. This was something we were going to talk about next week. And Adam absolutely did the right thing sending this to us when he got it, and he sent it along to us. It just timing wise, of course, this came just a little bit ago. So it definitely needed to be brought up. I do have concerns with, as Al had mentioned, feeling like, we don't necessarily like this project, but we do like this other one, so apply for this when it was cited in the email, specifically maintenance. I feel like there's going to be maintenance concerns in both of these projects. So, using maintenance as one reason, I guess, for denial when the maintenance will still exist in the next one could be problematic. But I guess my question, if I got a question here, would be on partial funding, because we've seen this a number of times where maybe they didn't get the full value, but they did get something. So was that a discussion about funding this partially, or to a certain extent, maybe funding one of the parklets or something?
I think the feeling was that we would fund something, but it wasn't what was covered in this application. When an application is received, we can't dictate how the money is going to be utilized. Correct me if I'm wrong, Laura, but we don't do that. We approve. Okay. So we felt that it would have been cleaner to come back with a new application if we wanted to take this forward, to review it on a different level and maybe a different scope, without the architectural costs involved, without the platforms being built, that is incurring. That's where the incursion, if that's a word.
It's a word now.
Of the majority of those dollars. So that's where we were thinking, is why we asked for another application to be considered. And when we have looked at other applications in the past and have denied them, we usually try to go back to the person requesting the grant and identify what they might consider bringing back to the committee for further consideration. And so I think this is different just because it was the city was the applicant, but our process, other than the discussion of, budgets and maintenance and that kind of thing, but the process wasn't any different from other processes that we've gone through with this.
Eileen, you had a hand up earlier.
Yeah, the definition of tourism, Laura gave us an excellent presentation here some months ago about, how the LTAC has been broadened and the use of the money has been broadened. We're not talking about just out of town tourists. We're talking about, generating economic activity. And we sort of use the word tourism just kind of by default. So the scope here is much broader to the ability to use that money. And I do question as to why the question on maintenance even came up. I mean, if we ask for this money, if we make this thing happen, then that's on the city to decide. That's us on the council. And if we mess it up, well, then that's on us. That's not on the LTAC committee. And I didn't think that there was ever any emphasis for making the parklets private. I thought it was always going to be public. when you exclude, I'm showing my John Locke here, when you exclude on property, then that puts an onus on the person who is excluding as the property owner, and they decide the use of the property within the limits of the law. That never was a part of this at all. Because if you want to serve.
It was, Eileen, when it was presented to us last week as a council. And when it was presented to in the LTAC application, it became a 3-area public parklet, 24/7 accessibility.
Yes, public, not private at all. The private consideration was never a part of that.
Yes, it was last week when we talked about it. Yes, it was.
Laura, I saw your hand up.
Thank you, Mayor. So part of the reason for the application, I think I can take the blame for that, was my explaining to staff that the city can't apply for a grant on behalf of a private entity. Right now, we don't have any applications. There's an application and a permit process, as Clayton explained at the last meeting. There's a process for a private restaurant to apply to have a streetery. And when the survey was done, it was an informal survey that was done by Jennifer. Questions were asked of the city about, well, can I serve alcohol out there? Well, that's not a question that the city can answer. That goes, we told them to contact the Liquor and Cannabis Board, because that relates to their liquor license and how that would happen. And there are specific requirements for serving alcohol outside in terms of control of the area. So as a pilot project and something that the city could immediately proceed with, then it was my recommendation that this just simply go the public route.
Absolutely.
Because there's less, because the city can do a public project. Those parklets or those platforms could subsequently be made available to restaurants who apply to have a streetery on that built platform. So that's part of the reason why it's only a public application, is because it's the city of Pullman that's the applicant, and they can't do a project for one of the restaurants downtown. Those restaurants are not prohibited from making their own applications, though. They certainly could. The other thing that I wanted to point out is in the statute that says what lodging tax funds could be used for, it specifically calls out supporting the operations and capital expenditures of tourism related facilities owned or operated by a municipality. So ultimately, this, like I said, the city could turn around and take one of these platforms and lease it to an adjoining restaurant for space. But if the city were to construct it, anyone under the phase 3 limitations could go pick up takeout at a restaurant and go use the public parklet to eat downtown and eat outside.
Nathan, I saw your hand up earlier. You don't? Okay. Maybe you're just moving around. Okay. With that,
yeah. So Mayor, just to circle back, and I appreciate everything that Councilwoman Wright had mentioned. I'm sure she feels like she's on the hot seat, but it's not intended to be. I'm just trying to without additional information, get a feel for what the decision making was like, so we as a council can decide how do we want to proceed. If we do need to modify, if there was a specific concern that we could modify and then be able to move forward, great. Just being able to think about those time constraints that we have, so we don't talk about it for 3 months and then it's too cold to do anything outside anyway. So
okay, now Nathan, I see your hand.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The only thing I would say is that, Councilmember Wright has been on this committee for a very long time. I completely trust her judgment and, her expertise. So, I know tonight has been, there's been a lot of questions for her, but, I just want to express my support for Councilmember Wright.
And she certainly handled those questions very well, like that last week, this week, and everything else. And she's well knowledge about it. With that,
in closing, I just want to say that this was a very, very, very deliberative discussion this afternoon. We had one item on the agenda, and this was it. And we discussed it for almost an hour and a half, and with lots of very, very substantive questions, comments, concerns. This was not a decision that was made lightly. And I might just add, even though I agree, you know, the criteria, the scoring sheet is, we've had this discussion before, is somewhat subjective, but scoring on this ended up to be 42 out of 100. So that certainly had some bearing on our decision, maybe validated the decision in a sense, but this was certainly not a close the door, we're never going to talk about it again. It was just, we need to take a little different approach to this and see what we can do, capitalizing on the assets that we do have going forward. So,
and Jen, you probably heard enough from council tonight that maybe you could redirect that application, perhaps.
Well, I certainly appreciate this discussion, so I will connect with staff and maybe reach out to a few of you also to kind of connect all the dots and see.
No, excuse me, council. I think we need to figure out tonight during the council meeting what the modifications are that you'd require to submit this in a timely manner. The options are either to modify the application and try and submit again, although it sounds to me like decreasing the scope down to one parklet may not necessarily address the needs of the lodging tax committee. The other option is that you can go the route of the 45-day waiting period that Laura has discussed in the past. And if you need a refresher on that particular route, she can jump in here as well. But I think we need to try and get to the bottom tonight about what direction staff should get from the city council.
Yeah, especially since time is so limited. So,
Mayor, would you like me to run through the 45-day process?
Okay.
So the council, when it intends to change the use of, or is anticipating or thinking about changing the use of the lodging tax revenues, which would be a budget amendment by yourselves, it notifies the Lodging Tax Advisory Committee of your intention, and then provides the Lodging Tax Advisory Committee with 45 days to provide you with their comments, and their comments on how your proposal would improve tourism, is designed to attract tourists, all of the same factors that they use in doing their checklist. They'd provide you with that feedback, and then the council can take action and either decide to spend the money, do the budget amendment, or decide not to. But that's one way. And then the other way is to do a second application to the Lodging Tax Advisory Committee that is different than the application you already submitted. And in that case, for that, you are limited to, the fact that it was a vote no completely on the recipient, which is the city of Pullman, means that application is actually dead in the water. You couldn't, they have to recommend a recipient, and you can change the amount, but you still have to provide them with the 45-day comment period. So really, if you want to proceed with this project, given the current state, what I would recommend is have a motion that notifies the council or the committee of your intention to do a change in the use of the LTAC funds through a budget amendment, what that would look like and how much that is and what it would be for, and then give the Lodging Tax Advisory Committee 45 days to provide you with their input on that proposal.
Okay, where's the council? Dan.
Question, kind of, Laura, you mentioned this before, but if the council goes forward with, that path and we build these public platforms. I think you said before, we could then, once we build them and place them, we could then turn to some of the businesses and have some sort of lease agreement so that they would be able to occupy that parklet at that point.
Yeah, so the purpose, as long as the purpose continues to be that it's a tourism related facility. So if the use is essentially the same, it's just who is operating it. I think that's still a tourism related facility. What you would be doing is your grant would be for the capital cost of doing that. You can also use grant funds for the continued operation of those parklets too. So if they need maintenance in future years, that's an eligible expense. But yes, that space could be made available just like the sidewalks are. It would be space owned and operated by the city unless it leases it to or licenses it to a property owner, a private business.
Okay.
So you heard Laura's presentation. Do you want to do the 45 days or do you want to do modify the agreement? Okay, Brandon?
Yeah, so time-wise, I mean, I'm thinking through that. That puts us at August, plus any build time. So is there, I mean, can we modify? Can we do a whole other application? Would that be easier? Would it, I mean, it seems like it would be easier without the time.
Yeah.
There's just no guarantees.
Al, I saw your hand up.
Well, what are we going to modify it to? That just starts from scratch, in my opinion. I'm not necessarily in favor of the suggestion of the lodging tax committee. I have some problems with that. And to just modify it to something totally different without more time and involvement in this, I'm against that. So my opinion is that the parklets are dead right now. Let's get the striping in and the bike lane in and the parking done.
And but not notify them so you have your 45 days where you can actually do it. Okay.
That's a no.
And parks.
I mean, I see what Councilmember Sorensen is saying, but I do disagree. I think part of the whole changing the lanes and restricting the traffic was for the accommodation of these parklets. And I would like to see them reconsidered in the most expeditious way. Councilmember Chapman's right, 45 days puts us to August. And if WSU is reopening, that's right when traffic will be increasing in our town. I was hopeful that we could get these situated and piloted before that influx arrives back into town. So I don't know what the best answer is here. I don't know if a reapplication would take just as long, implementation wise as waiting until the 45 days. But I would hate to see them completely scrapped because I felt like that was part of the impetus behind this whole project.
I concur.
Okay, Al's, and then we'll go to Nathan. Al's hand was up first. Okay.
Yeah, just real quick back to that. You guys have to remember the parklets had nothing to do with the BDS plan. This is all about samples basically. And when we go and do the new sidewalks and the bump outs and everything else, parklets are not going to be part of it because we're going to widen the sidewalk. Parklets were just something that got added to this as a test, just like we're putting the bike lane on the south side of the street where it will never be on that side of the street. It's going to be on the other side of the street. This was just to do some sampling, and to just do it for the parklets at this point down the road, I totally disagree. We need to do the things that we're thinking about doing in the future.
Okay, Nathan?
Well, I understand what Councilmember Sorensen is saying, but if we're going to do it, go full in. And, so I concur with Councilmember Parks on this.
Okay, I'll go to Dan Records and then we'll go to Brandon.
Well, my only concern with that is that, if we're talking about modifying, it sounds like the LTAC committee has already given us some clear indications of where they're thinking on these issues. And I'm just not sure that we can modify it in a way that's going to satisfy what those concerns are. And what Brandon said, I mean, like 45 days, like putting this off to August, like we're just not going to get much utility out of it in the season. And so if parklets are an idea in the future, I like the idea of parklets, but if those are an idea in the future, I think we're probably looking at, next year for trying something out. And that might be a situation where we're in a better financial situation, or we have a better sense of our financial situation at that point anyways. But I think that, doing the 45-day route, we're already at the end, I'm starting to get to the end of summer, and I'm just concerned that that's just the return on investment isn't going to be there for the kind of money we're looking at spending on that. But also I'm not sure what we can modify to the reapplication that's going to satisfy kind of the concerns that the LTAC was raising.
Brandon, then Pat.
Yeah, I just, in my mind, as I recall, when this first came up, of course, initially it was a much more radical idea, right? That one of our residents had put about closing Main Street and then turning Paradise into a two-way. And that obviously is vastly different with this proposal. But I know our business dean here at the university had emailed everybody with this idea of the outdoor seating. And a lot of that goes back to Councilman Record's survey that he had given. What would entice people to give business to some of these businesses downtown and still help them to feel safe? Obviously, being able to physically distance was a huge component of that. And we were in phase 2 when that happened, and we're in phase 3 now. So there's a bit more capacity, but at that point, right, 50%. Well, how do you increase the ability to have more people if you're a business owner? Well, maybe have more seating in some way, even if it's not private, right? Even if it's public, they feel like there's somewhere where they can go, get a good meal, and then they can go outside still. There's somewhere to sit, there's somewhere to enjoy their meals, spread out, feel safe. From economic development alone, we definitely want to increase the feeling of safety that people have, so that they can spend that money, which comes back to us, right? So I think, as I remember going back, that was a big component of this, not just the overall BDS plan, though downtown, like reimagining the way we do things, including placemaking and activating spaces, was a huge part of that. But what is the imminent thing that we're dealing with? And it was lack of a huge loss of sales tax revenue for the city, huge loss of business for these business owners downtown. And this was something that was going to help bridge the gap. And I'm not sure that just the road paint is going to do that.
Okay, let's go to Pat, and then let's get a motion and get this resolved for our next item, because Al has another new item. Okay, Pat?
Well, to go along with what Brandon just said, what my comment was going to be is that the impetus of some of this was as a result of that email from Dean Hunter. And if I recall correctly, it had to do with the streetery concept of this and expanding restaurant capability outside, where people could come and eat and feel more comfortable being outside. And so it in changing the concept of this from private to public, kind of changed the whole perspective of what we were looking at doing based on what started this whole thing. And so I think as a result of our wanting to push things out onto the street and possibly, closing Main Street or closing Paradise, whatever those scenarios were, that drove us to going to WashDOT to say, what can we do here? And then it was their recommendation, looking back at these pop-up parklet things. So in going to a fully private or fully public thing, that defeated the purpose of why we actually started this endeavor. Did I miss something in this?
No, it just, I'll mention that I do on Wednesdays, I do lunch with some friends of mine, and we will get takeout. And it's a hard thing to find a place downtown or outside that you can go and sit. There just aren't many options. And so this would be an outdoor option, even if it wasn't necessarily somebody with their private tables that we're spilling out. So I guess that's just one consideration, is that it still does give availability for people to feel comfortable getting the meal and then being outside and having somewhere to sit.
So let's try and resolve it tonight so we can at least know which direction you're going to go. And again, 45 days, you're talking August. And so we've heard about the time level. Should we just let it stay? Should you have a motion to go ahead with the parklets despite it has to be a whole new application? Where are you at? We need to get it resolved so we can move on. And we also have executive session tonight too. So
I would move to go forward with the parklets.
Okay, thank you. Do I hear a second?
Yeah, second.
Okay, we had a motion and a second. Any further discussion? I think we've had a lot of discussion. Okay, so now comes time. This is when Dee gets to take a look at board docs and make sure we have the voting correctly. And I'll look at hands the manual way. All those, yeah, Al?
I just need a little clarification. What does that mean? What, right, Laura? What does move forward with the parklets mean?
Nathan, since you made the motion.
I think we've had a pretty in-depth discussion about, you know, the plan for, you know, what LTAC, what they suggested. You know, please correct me if I'm wrong.
So do you mean as is with the 45 days,
45
and then
days.
just go forward despite the LTAC's recommendation or the vote from the LTAC? Is that what you're talking about, Nathan?
Yeah, I would say so.
Okay.
So you're saying notify them, wait your 45 days, and then take your action. Laura, I just want to make sure that's clear. Is that?
No, thank you. If that's the intent of moving forward with the parklets, so it would be to provide the LTAC with notice of your intention to spend up to 17,500 of lodging tax advisory committee funds for the 3 parklets as described in your original application.
Okay. Now everybody's clear. We've had a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye and raise your hand too. So.
Aye.
Aye.
I see 3. And Dee, correct me if should be 3. All those opposed signify by saying aye.
All right.
1, 3, 4. So it's defeated. Okay, with that, the next piece of new business, the last piece of new business, Al Sorensen.
Okay, I don't want to spend a lot of time on this. I know we've got executive session, but since we've moved into phase 3, could we get maybe a little bit of an update of where we're at on opening up some of our additional facilities, i.e. the library, the swimming pools, parks, and that type of thing? There's a lot of questions that I've been receiving, and there's a lot of people kind of wondering, what are we doing? So where are we at on this, and how are we moving forward with it?
Okay, Adam?
Thank you, Mayor. Staff have implemented a return to work document, which covers a lot of the sort of how to interact with the staff. Part of the delay is going to be the ordering of PPE for our non-public safety departments. We do have masks, but we want to make sure that we have enough masks to offer the public as they come and visit the different stations within City Hall as well. Currently, I've been told the court would like to start operations on the 23rd, and that's our goal, is to be able to be set up at City Hall to be able to function both the planning and public works section, as well as the finance, water bills, utility bill section. By the 23rd, I think we can accomplish that. We're doing a little bit of bartering to try and get enough paper or the throwaway masks to be able to make that happen. We also have to install the clear plexiglass coverings in some instances to make it happen. With regards to the library, our plan currently is to offer curbside pickup and some version of a delivery for folks who are unable to actually go and pick up certain items from the library. That'd probably be on Tuesdays and Fridays. Kurt, am I correct there? Yeah. We need to have a stronger plan in place, in my opinion, before opening up the aquatics facility. I have concerns about cleanliness and social distancing and the fact that you can't really wear a mask while you're swimming laps in the pool. And I think we need to come up with a stronger plan there, which Kurt and his staff are working on. But that's the delay. The parks are now open, as Councilmember McCall has alluded to. However, the bathroom facilities are not open at this time, again, due to the hardship of trying to keep the maintenance up of all those bathroom facilities, trying to keep them clean and to a level that I think they would need to be kept at to provide a safe enough environment for everybody. That's kind of where we're at the moment. Did I run through everything that you were?
Yeah, I've just been getting the questions about the different facilities opening, aquatic center, Rainy not opening. And, I guess when it comes down to having one of our aquatic centers open, we've got to make that decision. And I think we've got a lot of residents in town that are looking forward to getting back to one or the other or something. And I'm with you, Adam, on this, but I also want to make sure that we move along and keep moving along instead of just kind of sitting. Thank you.
Yeah, I agree, Councilmember. And I think that one of the other considerations is just with trying to operate two pools budgetarily, that wasn't going to be really feasible, especially given probably the limited amount of time that we'd be able to have the Rainy Pool facility open. So our goal certainly is to get the aquatic center open as we can in a safe manner.
And we're talking about first in-person council meeting on the 30th. We think we can get things ready at that point. However, still maintaining, if some people don't feel comfortable that way, that they can be on Zoom at the same time.
I think Councilmember the 23rd. The 23rd
Pardon?
council. I think the 23rd, Mayor.
Okay. Dan.
I was just going to ask, Adam, have there been new governor's kind of guidelines for public library facilities? Have those come out yet?
I'm not aware if there are new guidelines or not.
I think we're still waiting.
Okay.
Sorry, I was looking for my mute. There have been guidelines on curbside pickup
Right.
at libraries, but not the actual interior in person.
Yes, and Neal Public Library started that on the 15th, yesterday.
Okay.
May I ask a question of Adam about,
Sure.
or Kurt about, I had a resident ask me about, because they haven't been able to use the aquatic center and they have a membership. How is that being handled for folks who have memberships and they haven't been able to use it? Will we prorate or extend the subscription, or how does that work?
Yeah, right after we closed the aquatic center, we sent out an email to all the members, and what we said at that time and what we'll honor is that kind of when this is all done and, kind of when we can open back up, we'd evaluate, what time was lost. So basically we're looking, from mid-March till whenever we do open back up, and we would extend their memberships by that amount of time.
Okay.
Yeah. So once we can determine that, then staff will work through that process and add on that additional time to their expiration date.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions? With that, we will now adjourn the council meeting, and we will reconvene in an executive session for a period of 10 minutes to confer on considering the selection of site or acquisition of real estate by lease or purchase, again, for a 10-minute period. And as happened the last time, Rob, our IT, will